The insecurity that Americans are feeling after World War II must have been unsettling in the extreme. Wars, unless you count our Civil War, were always something that happened somewhere many thousands of miles away to people who spoke another language or worshipped another god. Now, however, one could look up into the sky and realistically fear that just one single plane, just a dot in the sky, could drop an object so tiny it would be almost invisible. In a moment, however, your reality would be forever changed. The world that would instantly become a nightmarish charnel house to rival the worst scenes of the last war. This could happen at any time. If everyone in the government was doing their job, at least there would be a warning, though. Planes could only travel so fast. You'd have maybe 7 or 8 hours. At least you could find a safe place to hide. Initially, it would have been very hard for the Soviet Union to drop an atomic bomb on the U.S. mainland. By 1949, they had successfully tested a fission bomb, but the only plane they had to deliver one of these was literally a carbon copy, like down to the last nut and bolt of an American B 29 that had sort of crash landed in their territory. I mean, sure, they could hit U.S. allies in Europe, but flying to the U.S. was a one-way suicide mission for their pilots since they didn't have the fuel to return home if, and that's a big if, they could deliver their payload at all before being shot down by U.S. fighters. In time, the Soviets will build the bombers, or so it was believed, and later intercontinental ballistic missiles would come into the game. So at this point, because of this new technology, instead of 7 or 8 hours, the Soviets could hit the U.S. in half an hour. By the time an ICBM showed up on the radar, it would be a mere 15 minutes from its target. Now, there would be no warning. For the first time, a major power could wipe the other from the surface of the earth before the other side could get out of bed. I mean, think about that. I mean, how destabilizing could that be? I mean, before, if either the US or the Soviet Union tried some sort of a sneak attack, the other side would know about it before anyone would get killed. I mean, sure, you might suffer a devastating attack. I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe half the people in your country might die, but that would be foolish of them because you'd have enough time to get your planes in the air and retaliate. I mean, your opponent would only have hours to savor victory before your bombers would hit his territory. No one would win. I mean, all you need to do in that situation is make sure you have enough bombs and planes to hit back. That should keep the idea out of the other guy's head. But now, I mean, all bets are off. I mean, I have often wondered about these Western movies where you have like these two gunslingers staring at each other down some like dusty street. Invariably the bad guy always seems to go for his gun, but the good guy is so quick that on the draw that the bad guy, he gets shot, or at least the gun will get shot out of his hand. But like, would that ever happen in real life? I seriously doubt it. Then there is the size and scale and just technical, I don't know, miracle of these things. I mean, they're really incredible when you think about it. They're mind-boggling. By the mid-1950s, your typical warhead on the nose cone of one of these missiles might be the equivalent of 2, 3, or 4 megatons, which is a million tons of TNT. I mean, just as a point of reference, all the bombs dropped in World War II put together would only equal 3.25 megatons. Now you can accurately place all of that in a radius of about 2 miles of some poor guy's house on the other side of the world. I mean, it's crazy. If you were just 60 years old in this era, you remembered a time when two bicycle repairmen seemed to work a miracle by getting some rickety cloth and wood contraption off the ground for about 80 feet. Now, super refined petrochemicals mix with liquid oxygen and propel a 200,000 pound rocket clear out of the Earth's atmosphere in about 5 minutes. From there, there's a capsule containing a thermonuclear gift basket would travel to the other side of the planet in low Earth orbit, all the while guided by nothing but inertia. I mean, when the thing finally comes barreling down to Earth again, it's traveling at typically at speeds of like 20,000 miles an hour. I mean, nonetheless, there's this complex series of electrical impulses that are occurring within this thing at a predetermined altitude. Conventional explosive are going to cause atoms to split and then others to fuse, and then briefly a miniature sun or a star would appear on the surface of the planet, beautiful to behold, unless you are anywhere near it. I mean, the temptation to strike first in this time period, it must have been unreal. And even scarier, I mean, put yourself in the position of the leaders, like President of the United States, the Soviet General Secretary. I mean, you know where the other guy is for the most part. I mean, you know where he lives. If you hit first and then you plan on it, you could evacuate yourself and everyone important to you to some random place on the other side of the world that no one would ever dream of attacking. Like some cabin in the middle of nowhere, some deep abandoned mine. I mean, anywhere. When you give your launch orders, you know with almost complete confidence that your adversary will have no time to get away. By the time you get to this point, Moscow will have dozens of weapons trained on it. I mean, so will Washington. Eventually, once you start getting to like the late 60s or 70s, I mean, there are going to be no bunkers on Earth strong enough to withstand a direct hit from one of these types of weapons. I mean, your only hope is just to fly away. But I mean, can you get the chopper off the ground and at least 30 miles away that fast? Yeah, and also direct a war in that time in 15 minutes. I mean, direct a counterstrike. Yeah, probably not possible. World leaders can be some pretty self-centered people. I think we can all agree on that. Maybe one of these guys would be willing to sacrifice 1 million of their own people if it guaranteed their safety and those of their family. I mean, nuclear war, sure, I don't know. It is bound to happen anyway. I mean, we'll strike the enemy. He'll get really demolished, but he won't have much back to hit with. At least it's happening on our terms. I mean, they'll get the worst of it. We might get hit back, but we'll win. Sure. Coincidentally, at least when it came to conducting the war, the United States and the Soviet Union were very similar. I mean, power flowed from the top. I mean, everything depended on the mentality of the president of the United States or the general secretary of the Soviet Union. If the wrong person found himself in the highest office, everyone might pay the price. And this person didn't need to be a bad person per se. I mean, maybe they might just be paranoid or insecure, or in the case of, at least a couple presidents, and I don't know how many of these general secretaries, but I mean, a lot of them had a penchant for like the bottle. What if you catch a guy when he's drunk? I mean, how does that even work? They might style themselves as rational. And nobody wants to go through a devastating war, but if you run the numbers and you play out the war games and you come to the conclusion that attacking first is objectively your best option, what do? Or what if you conclude that your opponent is also a rational person and attacking first is their best option? What if you believed by striking first, without any warning, you could catch the enemy totally unprepared? Maybe no one on your side will die at all. I mean, hell, you saved hundreds of millions of lives potentially. And maybe history would see past your treachery. I mean, this is what's known as a first strike capability. It would be the dread of any war planner. And if the other guy had it and they knew they had it, and you and everyone might be dead meat. You can't let that happen. Perhaps in the arms race, that you're behind and the other side is fixing to wipe you out at some opportune moment. Maybe that's what your intelligence says, right? Want to even the score, hit first. Maybe the other guy gets a blow in, but if you can knock out, 80% of his missiles, bombers, and subs before they can throw anything in your direction at all of a sudden the game's even. If you're lucky, some of your missiles might take out him personally, or at least his leadership. He can't organize his revenge, in the middle of that kind of chaos. And then there's another one. Hitting first has an advantage in a nuclear war that this often gets overlooked. It's a phenomenon known as the electromagnetic pulse, or the EMP. Believe it or not, this is something that people still spend a lot of time thinking about today, because it would be fairly easy to do, and people in the other country, they wouldn't even know what it is. Check this out. If you detonate maybe half a dozen warheads high over enemy territory, like the edge of space high, way out there, you can disable every electronic device, the telephones, the radios. I mean, hell, even the light switches won't work anymore. Doesn't matter if the power comes back on. They're fried. It's all gone. I mean, picture a nationwide power outage just minutes before communication becomes absolutely vital. I mean, your opponent is literally stuck in the dark ages right at the moment they can afford it the least. There was a U.S. nuclear test. It was called Starfish Prime, Central Pacific, 1962. A 1.4 megaton warhead. It was detonated 250 miles over a place called Johnson Atoll. So the power grid was knocked out 900 miles away in Hawaii. All telephone services down. Imagine the confusion that would cause. And how would you organize a counterstrike, in that kind of conditions? These are all things you have to think about when studying the history of this period. We're not getting into a ton of history this episode, but, that's okay, because there's going to be at least another 3 or 4 other episodes where that's all we're going to talk about. This is a total mind game. No matter, it's no wonder both sides will employ think tanks with mathematicians and social scientists, historians, even psychologists. I mean, as a leader, you have to take all of them seriously. I mean, let me put it this way. Fighting World War III is horrible. Nobody will dispute that. But losing it would be unimaginable.